Okay, so welcome back. Now, recently we talked about a 14-year-old laptop I bought for very inexpensive, like 80 US dollars on eBay. And we discussed about whether it's totally useless. And surprisingly, we found out that it's really surprisingly useful. And it does a lot of things. It runs Windows 10 fine. And one of the weaknesses was that the computer has what you see here, which is a main storage drive that holds the Windows 10. It runs fine on Windows 10, but this storage drive is an old hard disk drive, a Western Digital 500 gigabyte, and it's very slow. It goes about 100 megabytes per second, where a SSD solid state drive would go, 5 times as fast. So what we talked about was maybe upgrading this hard drive to what you see here, which is a SSD made by Samsung. Now you can see that this has a SATA connector on it. This SSD has a SATA connector on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how you can very quickly and easily transfer the contents of this operating system drive to this SSD. This hard drive is going to be inside your computer running Windows, and we're going to run some software to transfer the contents of this to this drive, but we're going to have to connect this somehow to your computer. Now again, since it has a SATA connector, you might have an extra SATA connector in your computer. You can just hook this up and you're all set. Another option is to use this cable here, which converts from a SATA. You can see it's got a SATA connector on one end. The other end, it's a USB 3. So all you have to do is plug this in and then hook it up to your computer, a USB port, and you can transfer the contents of this over that into the solid state drive. So makes it a whole lot easier, especially if you have a laptop, if you don't have a separate SATA connector inside the computer. So now let's take a look at some of the things you need to be aware of if you're going to be doing this, some of the limitations based on the software that we're going to be using to do the transfer. So what we're going to be talking about is using some free software from Samsung called, as you can see up here on the top, the Samsung Magician software. And inside of it, it has a feature called data migration. Now, previously, and probably from some of the videos you see on YouTube, this data migration used to be a separate application, and in the last year or so, we're in 2024, they integrated that data migration feature into the Samsung Magician software. So we're going to be talking specifically about Samsung Magician, the data migration feature, where we're cloning an operating system hard drive. And there are some things you need to be aware of if you're going to be doing this. So this, what's called the source drive, your hard drive that has the operating system that you're going to be moving over to this, what's called a target drive, the Samsung drive, this drive must be a Windows operating system drive. This software doesn't allow you, if this is just data on this drive, it doesn't allow you to migrate just data. It only works if you're going to move an entire operating system over to a new drive. So keep that in mind. Now, this source drive can be any manufacturer. It doesn't have to be Samsung. It can be any manufacturer, works with hard drives, whatever. Now, what's called the target drive has some requirements. I've found that this drive must first be formatted. It doesn't seem to work to put a Samsung right out of the box that hasn't been formatted. So I had to go through and format it. Pretty easy to do using the drive management software. We'll talk about that. And more importantly, this must be a Samsung drive, or else it's not going to recognize this. Now, another thing to be aware of, here we're showing a SATA connector, a SATA SSD from Samsung. I've seen where people have had issues if this, instead of being a SATA hard drive, it's an M.2 NVMe. Now, I haven't tried that, so it's up to you. If you've got that, you might want to do some searching to see if the M.2 NVMe is going to work. I've seen some problems. But with what you see here, a SATA SSD from Samsung should work fine. All right, so keep that in mind. Now, the software we're going to use is what you see here called Samsung Magician. And I'll assume you know how to go on the Samsung website and download Samsung Magician. And when you start it up, you'll see this. Actually, I went into settings and changed from the theme light mode to dark mode. Here's light mode. I can't stand it. So I went to dark mode, and you can see it's got a bunch of stuff. It does some performance benchmarking, but down here under data management, you now have this data migration, which is what does the migrating of the operating system from one drive to a Samsung drive. So again, download the Samsung Magician. You may see people talking about when this data migration was a separate application. It's no longer separate. It's part of this Samsung Magician. So download Samsung Magician. You can use this data migration. Up here, it shows all of the drives it has detected. And you can hit this refresh to, if you added one, you can refresh this. But you go into this data migration, scans for drive information, and you can select what source drive you want. Right now it's selected on this. I can select this one. I can select this one and go back to data migration. And you can see if I select a drive that doesn't have an operating system, it's not going to work. So it only wants one that has the operating system. You can see now it found the C drive with the operating system. It's all set to go. So I can go into data migration, scanning for hard drive information. And here is our source drive, disk 1. It tells you some of the data, but it's saying, what's the target drive? I need to select a drive. So if you have your Samsung SSD connected, it says, please select a Samsung SSD. Again, no other manufacturer. And you can select a drive, and you should see the drive that you hooked up either via SATA or via that USB to SATA connector. And you can select that drive and go through, and then down on the bottom left, it's going to say start to do the migration, and it will give you a status bar. If you're going from a very slow drive to your SSD, it might take like 15 minutes, so don't be surprised if it takes a long time. It might take even longer if you've got a very big drive. So assume it's going to take a long time. But that's basically it for the data migration software from Samsung. Now, again, there's other software, free software. It's a bit more complicated, but it does, of course, more complicated, and it does more things. So I'll leave it to you if you don't want to use a Samsung drive, or you want to have some more flexibility, you look at some other software. But that's it for this one. If you like any of these videos, I encourage you to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell notifications. But most of all, please let others know that we're here so we get some views. Really appreciate it. Otherwise, take care. Have a really good day. Thanks.